everyone. Today the presentation is about our assignments for the network securing reports. The content in this presentation will be about the objectives of this report, then the current network, which is in the state in it right now, the proposed network, detailed in the design and the solution, a review, then question time at the end. The objectives, absolutely. The main objective of the assignment is to secure a network. So building the current network design, because the IT department in the Goodnight company wasn't generous enough to provide us with a current design, so we need to build it ourselves. But they provided us with a description. Depending on that description, we built the design. Then we analyze the current network, and we point out the assets which is in this network and the weaknesses in this design. We list the security threats that might occur to any online business. So the focus of this report is that this is an online business. It does it sells merchandise online. So that is a big focus. In the general and in the network in the current state. The next stage is to propose a new network design with the appropriate recommended solution to secure and protect both of the assets, the clients, and the staff of this network. At the end, we'll provide a full design review and a conclusion at the end of the report. The current network, we have two zones, the main office and the DMZ. There are some servers missing in the DMZ. There's old equipment in the main office. There are a lot of weaknesses in the current network. But as a network engineer, what I think the catastrophe in this is that the servers and the switches is put it next to a coffee machine. That was the really like deadline and
and it is really real.
Yeah.
It's not like
because
I've seen many times.
Well, that's this is the point when you get this is really unacceptable.
But that's good for administrators.
Yeah.
It's close to them.
They will have a cup of coffee, then administrators.
But you think it from the other side. Yeah. Maybe it would be an open area that nobody will touch it.
No, I don't think so. I will not accept that idea at all.
Yeah, if it is a small company, they think that it's nobody will come here, nobody will touch it. If there's a unknown person, I'm going to see it. But actually, you have to think about long term. If this company will be bigger, we will have many people. So the access is something that I have to think about.
There's a phrase that we say in Arabic, أقل الإيمان. So at least it needs to be in a separate room. At least.
Oh,
I'm not talking about security.
Everybody here can understand Arabic. He kind of understand.
So that means at least. So at least it needs to be even not locked. I'm not saying that lock it with a key.
Partition.
Yeah.
Just be in a separate room, not opposite to the coffee machine. So that was the really the dead point I may say in the current network. This is the network design which is in the current state. We have two firewalls. I'll talk about the weaknesses later. But we have two servers in the DMZ connected to the internet via a router. We have 6 servers in the main office. There's unfortunately there's no segregation in the main office. But the point is, all of this is assumptions. So it could be worse even that's because most of the time, the IT department will just provide you with a description, and you need to do assumptions. So I assumed the network design to be like that. Could be worse, could be better. I don't know. So one of the main points that I focused on the report, that this kind of a report needs to have a meeting with the board and with the IT department to have more details, what they need to secure, and what is the really current state of the network. What are the assets that I found in this company? Firewall, web server, database, email server, internal devices, and the staff personal computers. The firewall, this is the important equipment, I might say, that the company has at the moment. So most of them are servers. These are, in my opinion, is listed prioritized, because if literally I said in the report, if your firewall was not configured correctly, everything else is just open in the space. So first of all, you need to configure, and you need to make sure that your firewall is working right. So that's step one. Then step two, the web server, because this is an online business, so you need to secure your web server, because each of your transactions will be done by your web server.
Are your assets organized by order of importance?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
The database, everything happens on the web server will be connected in one way or another to the database. The email server, why it's the email server is important? Because it's a really point which any abuser can attack the network. Because as a company, as a trade, you must have emails going in and out. That's inevitable. So you need to have something going out and in. That's through the emails. The simplest way to attack a company is to send something that can get into the email. The internal server is less important, because anyway it's in the LAN zone, so it's it's protected anyway with 2 levels of security in the firewall, so it's less important from the security point of view. The internal devices, the only point that I find as a mistake or as a weakness is the internal devices must be properly configured. If the guys in the network didn't configure the firewall and left it at default, so imagine the internal devices, they will be left as default or admin, I don't know. The staff personal computers, because you attend that the staff may be stored on their personal computer some kind of data related to the company, so that's another asset. The weaknesses, number one in my opinion is the physical security, like I said before. This is the most important threat that I think the company has. The servers must not be placed near a coffee machine, just at least in a separate room. I proposed a locked room with card readers to make it accessible only by IT staff. Firewall misconfiguration is second stage. You need to configure your firewall well if you need to protect anything in your network. The server's operating system, you have Windows NT. Because it's an old system, it will maybe have a lot of vulnerabilities, because anyone or any hacker knows all about it, because it's an unupdated system. The distribution of the servers is really important. You need to know which servers to put in the DMZ, which servers to put in the LAN. So there's a really weakness in how the servers are distributed at the current state. The missegregation, I think, is very important, because if you don't well segregate your servers, your LANs, will be you don't want someone from the from the staff to access your servers, the regular staff, to access your servers, because they are on the same segment. And at the end, the weakness is the equipment misconfiguration. Everything in this company is left as default, so it's a really weakness. You don't have a proper configuration on each equipment on the company. It will have a point of interest to the network. This is the security threats assigned in a table after a lot of amendments. Thanks to Dr. Asma for that. We have the affected network assets, which is here. The network weaknesses that I listed earlier, and the possible attacks which are related to these two. So the physical security is related to all the infrastructure assets, because all of them is put next to a coffee machine. So I meant in infrastructural is the personal computers will not be in that place. So everything related to the infrastructure will be there. Physical security related to that. I will have physical attacks, so someone will have some hammer and crash or hammer the servers or the switches. inside attacks, which is really important, you just have someone login into your server or your switch to manipulate everything. Viruses and worms and trojans, someone can stick some flash drive into your server to download a worm or download a trojan or whatever. If you want more details, you can read on the slide. Each weakness is related to an asset, and each asset is related to a possible attacks that may happen because of these weaknesses, and which asset will be affected by that weakness, and which weakness will be attract the possible attacks. Should I go in detail with them?
Just give me 1 minute. I'm going to mark it.
Okay. Okay.
Slide 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
Go?
Yeah.
Okay. This is my proposed network design. From what I've read, it's really good and important to have 2 zones before getting into the internal network. So we have 2 zones here, which is the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, and we have the database zone, which is a second security level, and we have the LAN zone, which is the internal network, which have security level 3. So we have 1, 2, then 3, and I have in the middle something I read about, is called the control zone. We can add security facts in there, having a router in there. So if you want to implement something or some kind of data, you can put it there. So we have the email agent will be placed on the DMZ, not the whole email server. Just an agent to communicate between the email the email server, which is in the internal, and the external networks, to make some segregation. The web server, absolutely, and the security server will act like an IDS, like antivirus and anti-malware, and will protect everything in the DMZ and in the database. So they are connected through the security, and will act as an authentication server. This is a really important thing. If you need to have any kind of a remote access to the network, you need to go to the security server at first. The replica servers is a very interesting thing. To back up the web server, it's 100% identical to the web server. It's updated every half an hour with the information that the web server has, but it's not working. It's in an ideal state. So if anything happened to the web server, so this is to raise the availability, if anything happens to the web server and this goes down, this kicks in right away. The only disadvantage of this is it will consume some of your bandwidth. Because it's idle, that's right, but it's not off. So it will have some kind of packets running around. Probably that packets will be also a point of attack. But it's a really good solution if I want to show a high availability to a website. In the database zone, I absolutely have the database server, the FTP server, and the backup one. I have 2 levels of backup here. I will talk about that in detail later on. The FTP and the database server, if they want to be accessed from outside, you need to have an authentication process run through the security server. Then we have the internal network, which I have 2 layer 3 switches. I implemented those to have a really high level of segregation through VLANs. So I created several LANs to segregate the management from the staff. And this is just an assumption. If you can't add, you can add easily account, department, call center department, whatever departments you want to add. It's really easy to add them on a layer 3 switch. So I stripped out the old core, and I installed a new core depending on the 2 layers, layer 3 switches, and they are connected to each other with something called Ethernet. So they are viewed from everything else in the network as a one device. So that's a really high availability as well. The servers, I have the main server will contain the domain controller, the DHCP, the DNS for the internal network. I have a test server here to test everything developing on the web server and everything else. The internal security server will act as an IDS agent for the security server outside, and which will have an anti-malware and anti-virus service going there. backup 2. This is the second level of backup, and the replica server for the main. Because the main, if we think about the internal network, from the internal network view, the most important server here to keep the network running is the main server. So that's why I have a replica for the main server. I think I listed everything. I will go through fast with here. The physical security will be placed in the separate room. The room will have access only granted to the IT staff by a card reader. The firewall misconfiguration, it must be latest equipment with the high updates. The firewalls which is installed, PIX, is really old, and Cisco don't support them anymore. So yeah, the firewall configuration, the dual firewall architecture is more secure approach than the single firewall approach. So that's why I had two firewalls going there. It's called the dual firewall architecture, and I used Cisco ASA, whatever, 5500X with the proper configuration. This is the latest equipment from Cisco to as a firewall in a medium-sized network. Server OS, I will not go in detail, but I really recommend that the servers have a Linux-based software, not Windows. I believe that Unix is always more secured, so I chose the OpenSUSE Linux Enterprise Server Service Pack 3, the edition number 11. Why did I do that? Because it's more stable, more perform faster, compatible with several security services. It's compatible with several server architectures, and can offer lower door time and advantages in hardware and RAS security. This advantages I took it from the OpenSUSE website. The server's distribution, like I said, it's highly recommended that I have a third security zone, which is the database zone, to segregate the important servers from the less important servers that I have. They need to be accessed less frequently than the servers in the DMZ. I have 3 security levels. DMZ, database, and LAN. Security policies number 1, 2, 3. Every security level is more restricted than the other. Then I have the control zone in the middle. If I have something that I really need to encrypt or to protect or to secure, I can secure it in the control zone for extreme measures. The DMZ, I have the web server, email agent, security server. Like I said, the security server will act like as a IDS, Snort IDS. This is the addition, because it's mostly widely used as an IDS system, and it's compatible with the Linux servers. Because I had all my servers as Linux-based, so I need to have the system Linux-based. The anti-service and multi-malware will be Kaspersky security for Linux servers. From my point of view, Kaspersky is the best there from that point of view. I don't know if probably you have a different idea, but it's compatible with the Linux servers and can provide a unique security level for this size of a company, and it will act as an authentication server for remote access if anyone wants to remote access the network. I talked about the replica server is to ensure high level of availability of the web server. The database zone, the only thing important here that the FTP server will only be accessed after the authentication granted for the security server. The database server will encrypt the data, the transport data, with something called TDE, which is Transfer Data Encryption. That is provided by Oracle, so it's a really, really good solution. It enables to encrypt sensitive data such as credit card information, and that was the reason behind me choosing TDE, because this is as well, this is an online business. It have credit card information distributed with the customers, so it needs to be encrypted. And the backup server. The backup server on this level will run as an hourly backup. So every hour I have a backup for really sensitive data. So any attack will happen, I have a really high availability to restore that data. The control zone, like I said, is created between the 2 firewalls to apply even more security by segregating the zones by a router. The LAN zone, we now in the safe side. The main server, like I said, domain controller, DNS, DHCP, and email. We have a test server. The security server will be acting as an IDS agent, antivirus, anti-malware, and an anti-spam server connected to the main server for the email services. Backup, I have level 2 backup. It's in the internal side, so I will have a daily backup. At each of n day, that server will have a kind of backup to the really important services that is provided by this company. The replica server will be implemented to ensure high level of availability of the main server. Segment-based segregation, if I want to put it in a really simple words, it's just creating several LANs or several segments to segregate all the stuff depending on the office rank, which is, I assumed, at the moment just management, IT and staff. More can be added easily in the future. How I can implement this? By the layer 3 switches, and it's more easy to route between those segments when you have a layer 3 switch. Anything else? Yeah, this solution will minimize the probability of having a weak point that enables an internal or external abuser to penetrate to another segment. So probably if some attacker had an access to the staff segment, it's kind of hard to move to other segments if they are segregated well. Equipment misconfiguration, really the really important points, you need to configure well and secure well all the equipment running in the internal network, such as the layer 3 switch. But the noticeable is the wireless access points. It needs to be secured by the WPA because this is an enterprise, and WPA is the more advanced secure. It will authenticate through the IEEE 802.1, and the encryption will be AES to secure the access via wireless networks. The point is that, because it's a Wi-Fi, so it's small range, so your attackers will most of the time will be who can be close to your network, your neighbors in the building, someone who comes as a guest, so you need to secure from that point of view. This is the proposed network design another time, so if you can have another look at it. I don't think I have anything left to say here. Yeah, that's it. Design review at the end. It meets the requirements successfully. It ensures availability, scalability, and security. It implements the required equipment. It protects the assets, number 1, the staff, number 2, and the clients, number 3, by encrypting, like I said, all the data in the database server will be encrypted. It will have in mind the extension in the future. It uses Cisco equipment and Unix equipment, and from my point of view, when you use the same vendor in all your company, you will have a higher level of compatibility. So that will make your security even higher. Yeah, the wireless access point was a really weak point in the network. It will have a really big benefit of mobility, but it will have lack of security. We provided a wireless security measures are taken because you need to have a wireless network in the company. At the end, the disadvantage in the review of this report is because we don't have a specific security requirements from the IT department. We can't go anything in detail. So I assume that the data in the database need to be secured, but I don't know as a company if they want to encrypt something else. So that's what was a barrier. So this is a general security, not a really general, but most of the time is a general, and the report is not related to a budget because at the end of the day, you need to stick with what the company can afford to make the changes that I need. These are the references that I used to make the report, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm really happy because I will be the only person who will be asking questions today.
Wow.
So, thank you for this very good presentation.
Thank
We
you.
covered many things I already know because I have been reading many drafts
Yeah.
of your work. So,